Everyone knows the Iowa and the Missouri, the great steel giants that ended the Second World War and fired their guns into the modern age. But long before any of them existed, America built an entire generation of battleships that history has almost completely forgotten. One of them exploded in a foreign harbor and dragged the United States into war. One of them made a desperate race halfway around the world that became a national legend, and a whole fleet of them, painted brilliant white from bow to stern, sailed around the entire planet just to prove a point. This is the story of America's very first battleships. Let's go. To understand how strange these ships are, you have to picture America in the 1880s. The most powerful nation in the New World had a navy that was, frankly, an embarrassment. A collection of aging wooden ships left over from the Civil War, outgunned by countries a fraction of its size. And then, almost overnight, that changed. In 1895, the United States commissioned its very first true battleship, USS Indiana, hull number BB-1. She was a strange, brutal-looking machine, low in the water, bristling with enormous guns, wrapped in thick iron armor. Alongside her two sisters, Massachusetts and Oregon, she formed the Indiana class. But here is what makes these first battleships so unusual. They were never really meant to cross oceans. They were floating fortresses, built to sit close to the American coast and smash any enemy fleet that dared to come near. They were short-ranged, they were heavy, and they rode so low that in rough seas the ocean would wash straight over their decks. And yet, for the first time, the United States had capital ships that could look the great navies of Europe in the eye. The world would not have to wait long to see them fight. And the spark, when it came, was a catastrophe. In January of 1898, the armored ship USS Maine steamed into Havana Harbor in Spanish-controlled Cuba on what was supposed to be a peaceful visit. For 3 weeks, she sat quietly at anchor, and then on the night of February the 15th, she was torn apart by a massive explosion that lit up the entire harbor. In seconds, the Maine sank into the mud, taking more than 260 American sailors down with her. To this day, no one knows for certain what caused the blast. It may have been a mine, it may have been an accident in her own coal bunkers. But in 1898, the cause hardly mattered. Newspapers across America screamed a single phrase: "Remember the Maine." Within weeks, the United States and Spain were at war. A single battleship and her destruction had changed the course of history. But the most incredible story of that war belonged to a different ship entirely. When the fighting began, one of America's newest battleships, USS Oregon, hull number BB-3, was stationed on the wrong side of the continent, all the way out on the Pacific coast. The war was in the Caribbean, thousands of miles away, and there was no Panama Canal to cut across. So Oregon did the only thing she could. She ran. She steamed south down the entire length of South America, around the treacherous storms of Cape Horn at the very tip of the continent, and back up the Atlantic, over 14,000 miles in just 66 days. The whole nation followed her voyage in the newspapers, day by day, willing her to make it in time, and she did. Oregon arrived in the Caribbean ready to fight, and her legendary dash became one of the single strongest arguments for finally building a canal through Panama. When the two fleets finally met at the Battle of Santiago de Cuba, it was no contest. As the Spanish squadron tried to break out of the harbor and escape, America's new battleships Oregon, Iowa, Indiana, and their sisters fell upon them. In a single running battle along the Cuban coast, the entire Spanish fleet was destroyed, and in that one afternoon, the world was forced to recognize something new. The United States was no longer a regional power hiding behind its own coastline. It was a naval force to be reckoned with. Victory changed everything. The trickle of new battleships became a flood. Class after class rolled down the slipways, each one a little larger, a little more powerful than the last. The Kearsarge class, with its strange stacked gun turrets, one set of guns mounted directly on top of another. The Illinois class, the Maine class, named for the lost ship, the Virginia class, hull numbers climbing steadily through the single digits and into the teens. America was learning one ship at a time how to build a modern battleship, and it was learning fast. That long climb reached its peak with the Connecticut class, beginning around hull number BB-18. These were, by common agreement, the finest pre-dreadnought battleships America ever built. Well armored, heavily armed, with a powerful mix of guns and a graceful, purposeful profile. They were good sea boats, they were tough, and they represented everything the United States Navy had taught itself in a single frantic decade. If the story had ended here, the pre-dreadnought would be remembered as a triumph. But these ships were about to be given one last glorious moment in the spotlight before the whole world changed beneath their feet. That moment came in 1907. President Theodore Roosevelt, a man who believed in showing strength, had an audacious idea. He would take 16 of these battleships, paint their hulls a brilliant gleaming white, and send them on a cruise around the entire world. The Great White Fleet, as it became known, steamed out of Virginia and simply kept going. Down to South America, across the Pacific to Australia and Japan, through the Suez Canal and the Mediterranean, and home again. Over 14 months and 43,000 miles, visiting ports on nearly every inhabited continent. Everywhere they went, enormous crowds gathered to watch these gleaming white giants glide into harbor. It was a floating message written in steel, and every nation on earth understood it. America had arrived, and America could reach anywhere in the world. But even as those white hulls sailed home in triumph, they were already obsolete. Because while the Great White Fleet was crossing the oceans, a single ship built in Britain had quietly made every battleship in this story worthless overnight. Her name was Dreadnought. She carried nothing but big guns. She was faster than anything afloat. And the moment she launched, every other battleship on the planet, including all 16 of America's proud white warships, was instantly a generation out of date. The story of the pre-dreadnought ends where the next age begins, with the New York class, USS New York, hull number BB-34, and her sister ship Texas were the last and most powerful of America's old-style battleships. Heavily armed, driven by powerful engines, they were magnificent machines, and they were born already old, launched into a world that had moved on to the dreadnought. Texas remarkably still survives today as a museum ship, the last American battleship of her entire era, left floating anywhere on Earth. And so think about what these forgotten ships actually did. In just 20 years, from the launch of USS Indiana to the eve of the First World War, America's first battleships carried the nation from a coastal power with an embarrassing fleet to a global empire whose warships had circled the entire planet. They won a war, they started a war, they inspired a canal, and they announced the United States to the world. Every battleship that came after them, every dreadnought, every fast battleship, the Iowa, the Missouri, all of it, was built on the keel these forgotten ships laid down first. They deserve to be remembered. If you made it this far, subscribe and stay tuned, because we are working our way through every warship the United States ever built.